Imagine waking up at 3 in the morning, not because your alarm went off, not because your kid is crying, but because a 22-year-old from Manila is about to step onto a tennis court in Austria and you refuse to miss a single second of it. That's what happened. Across Europe, across the Middle East, across every time zone where Filipinos had built a life far from home, people set their alarms, brewed their coffee, and sat in the dark staring at their phones and laptops, waiting. And most of the world had absolutely no idea this was happening. That's the part that gets me. While the mainstream tennis media was busy analyzing seedings and surface statistics, an entire nation was vibrating at a frequency nobody else could hear yet. Until they couldn't ignore it anymore. Until the flights sold out. Until the numbers hit the newswires. Until even the most seasoned sports journalists had to stop, look up from their usual storylines, and ask, who is this girl, and what on earth is she doing to the Philippines? Her name is Alex. And this is the story of how she moved a country so hard that a commercial airline had to reroute its entire operation just to keep up with the love. Let's go back to the beginning because context matters here, and the beginning is not what you might expect. The Philippines is not a tennis country, at least it wasn't. You grow up there, and the sport that consumes your household is basketball. You play it in the street, you argue about it at dinner, you follow it like religion. Boxing is the other heartbeat, the sport that gave the country Manny Pacquiao and with him a kind of national pride so fierce it stopped wars. Literally, when he fought people would call ceasefires in conflict zones just to watch. Tennis, though, tennis was something you watched on cable if you happened to be up late enough and stumbled across Wimbledon. It was not a sport that felt like yours. It felt like someone else's story playing out on someone else's courts in cities you'd never visited. And then a girl from Manila picked up a racket. Alex didn't arrive with an announcement. There was no press conference, no Nike billboard, no moment where the sporting world turned its head and said watch this one. She came up the way most genuinely great athletes do, through the grinding, unglamorous ladder of junior tennis, winning matches that barely made the news, developing a game that coaches noticed even when cameras didn't. What separated her from the beginning wasn't just talent, it was something harder to measure. A quality in the way she competed that made people who watched her feel slightly uneasy, the way watching someone completely sure of themselves can make you uneasy, because you sense that they've already decided something you haven't been told yet. She earned a spot at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain, and if you know anything about what that place represents, you understand that this wasn't a consolation prize or a participation trophy. The Nadal Academy doesn't collect promising kids and leave them to figure it out. It builds competitors from the inside out. It teaches you that the mental side of tennis is not secondary to the physical, it is the physical. It teaches you that the point isn't lost until it's lost, that the set isn't gone until it's gone, that the match is never over until you decide it is. Alex absorbed all of it. And she brought something back that the academy itself couldn't manufacture, a reason that was bigger than rankings. She was playing for something the other students simply didn't have, the knowledge that back home, an entire country was watching a sport it had never watched before because of her. That pressure would have crushed most people. It became her fuel. Now let's talk about Austria because that's where the story ignites. The tournament drew its usual attention, top seeds getting the early headlines, familiar names filling the preview columns. Alex's name was in the bracket and the analysts were measured, competitive, improving, one to watch, the kind of language that's technically a compliment but doesn't make anyone's pulse quicken. What nobody wrote in those previews was that she was about to play the best tennis of her young life in front of an audience that would grow bigger with every single match. Her early rounds were sharp. Not flashy, sharp. There's a difference. Flashy is for highlights. Sharp is what wins matches. Her ground strokes had an edge to them, her movement was relentless in the way that wears opponents down before they even realize it's happening, and her composure, that composure that people kept trying to describe and kept falling short on, was something you had to watch to understand. She looked like someone who had already played this match in her head 1,000 times and was simply executing a plan she trusted completely. Then came the quarterfinal, and this is where time stops. She was matched against a seasoned European player, someone with years of experience on every surface, someone who had been in tight matches before and knew exactly how to close them out. The crowd was polite. The conditions were neutral. On paper it was a good match on an ordinary afternoon. What actually happened was something else. The first set was the kind of tennis that makes you forget to breathe. They traded holds, traded breaks, pushed each other through a tiebreak that had people in the stands exchanging glances because something was clearly happening on this court that you don't stumble across every week. Alex lost the tiebreak by 2 points. She walked to her chair, toweled off her face, and looked down for a few seconds. And here is the thing that everyone who was watching that moment up close said afterward: she didn't look like someone who had just lost a set. She looked like someone who had just made a decision. The second set belonged to her. The forehands came harder and with more intent behind them. She started reading her opponent's serve not just well enough to return it but well enough to attack it, flipping the dynamic, turning defense into offense, forcing mistakes from a player who didn't make many. She took the second set convincingly and walked back to her chair for the change of ends with that same unnerving calm, except now the crowd felt it too, and what had been polite attention had become something much more electric. The third set was the one. They traded games all the way to 5-all, and then Alex broke. She stood at the baseline to serve for the match and 3 match points came and went, her opponent refusing to go quietly, the crowd fully on its feet now, the noise enormous for what had started as a quiet afternoon in an unremarkable draw. On the 4th match point she hit a backhand down the line. Not a desperate backhand, not a get-it-in backhand. A deliberate, perfectly weighted, unhesitating backhand down the line that clipped the corner so cleanly that her opponent, who had been competing at the highest level for over a decade, actually paused before extending her hand at the net, as if she needed 1 extra second to properly acknowledge what she had just witnessed. Alex covered her face. She stood in the middle of that Austrian court with her hands over her eyes and she cried. And thousands of kilometers away, in living rooms and offices and internet cafes and cramped apartments in 14 different countries, an entire diaspora cried with her. The Filipino community in Europe is something that deserves its own documentary. It is vast and scattered and deeply, stubbornly connected to a home most of them haven't stood in for years. They carry the culture everywhere, the food, the language, the instinct to take care of each other, and this particular brand of collective pride that activates when one of their own steps into the light. When Alex's quarterfinal win went viral, and it went viral within minutes, something ignited in that community that had no precedent. They didn't just want to watch the next match on a screen. They wanted to be there. Physically in Austria, in that stadium, in those seats, wearing their colors and screaming in a language that had never echoed off those walls before. Filipino expats started checking flights simultaneously across a dozen countries. Travel agencies run by Filipino diaspora members reported phone volumes they hadn't seen in years. Group chats that usually circulated recipes and news from home became real-time flight coordinating operations. Philippine Airlines, watching this unfold from their operations center with what must have been a mixture of pride and logistical panic, made a decision that no airline had ever quite made for a tennis player. They added 200 flights. Not 200 seats. Flights. Expanded routes, rerouted capacity, coordination with connecting carriers, the kind of operational pivot that takes airlines weeks to plan, executed in hours because the demand was that real and that urgent. The flights went on sale just before 7 in the morning Manila time. They were completely sold out by 7:01. 4 minutes. Every seat on 200 additional flights gone in 4 minutes. The screenshots spread across social media immediately, people posting sold-out booking pages in all caps, people who missed the window expressing their devastation, people who got tickets expressing a joy that was completely disproportionate to having bought a plane ticket and absolutely proportionate to what it actually meant. One post that circulated everywhere simply said, "I booked. I have no hotel. I have no plan. But I booked." Nearly 500,000 people liked it because they understood it completely. Sports media picked up the story fast. The headlines ran across Europe and Asia, an airline rerouting infrastructure for a quarterfinal win, a fanbase mobilizing across a continent overnight, Vienna bracing for a wave of Filipino supporters who had made up their minds that wherever Alex went, they were going too. And somewhere in an Austrian hotel room, Alex read the news and reportedly had to sit down. Not everyone was celebrating, and this part matters because easy triumph is not the whole story. The tennis world has forums and analysts and commentators who make their living by being precise and sometimes by being cold, and some of those voices arrived at the party with their eyebrows already raised. The draw had been soft in places, said some. The opponent had been managing a minor physical issue, noted others. A quarterfinal win in a mid-tier tournament does not a legend make, wrote at least one columnist who clearly felt that someone needed to apply the brakes. A few European commentators tried to describe the Filipino fan response and landed on words like adorable and charming but premature, which were received by the Filipino internet with a particular fury that comes from centuries of being told to temper your expectations by people who have never once had to temper theirs. The columnist who used adorable found their mentions thoroughly occupied for the following week. There were also voices suggesting the airline numbers couldn't be real, that 200 flights selling out in 4 minutes was either a publicity stunt or a rounding error. Philippine Airlines released their verified booking data. The numbers stood. Every flight. Every seat. The skeptics went quiet, most of them, and the ones who didn't dug in the way skeptics do when the facts stop cooperating with their narrative. But the backlash had done something quietly useful. It had made the next match feel larger than tennis. It had become a referendum, not officially, not in any structured way, but emotionally, The kind of referendum that happens when enough people feel like something they love is being dismissed. When Alex sat down in front of a microphone after all of this, the flights and the sold-out tickets and the opinion columns and the trending hashtags, she did something that cut right through the noise.
She was calm.
Not the managed calm of media training, not the careful calm of someone choosing every word for strategic effect. A real calm, the kind that tells you a person has already been somewhere deeper than the current chaos and come back from it decided. A journalist asked her about the weight of carrying a nation's hopes. She paused, not to find an answer, but choosing how honest to be. "I don't think about the flights," she said. "I think about the people who didn't sleep to watch me play. That's what I carry. Not pressure. Love." 2 sentences and every journalist in the room reached for something to write on because she had named something precisely that athletes spend entire careers trying to articulate and usually can't.
She didn't frame it as burden. She said it was fuel.
She talked about growing up watching tennis and never seeing anyone who looked like her at the level she was dreaming about. She talked about the Nadal Academy and what it built in her, not just the technical precision but the mental architecture, the understanding that your body will tell you to stop before it actually has to, and that the difference between good and great is what you do in the gap between those two things. She talked about the Filipino fans with a tenderness that was almost difficult to watch without feeling it yourself.
They change shifts, she said.
They book flights without hotels. They do all of this for me. I want them to know that when I'm on that court, I see them. I actually see them.
The semi-final she lost.
The eventual finalist was ranked in the top 20 and had been there for years, and on that particular day in that particular match she was the better player and Alex knew it and competed anyway and lost in straight sets without collapsing, without making excuses, without giving the crowd who had flown across Europe a single reason to feel like their journey had been wasted. Because here is the thing about a loss that's competed well. That is not pessimism. That is the road. And what will meet her on that road, every single time, are the people who booked those flights without hotels, who stayed up until 4 in the morning, who typed in all caps, who cried in internet cafes in Spain and Germany and Italy watching a girl from Manila decide something with a backhand that the rest of the world is only beginning to understand. The question isn't whether she has what it takes. Austria answered that. The question is how far she's going to go. And whether you're ready to stay up late enough to find out.